Alright, so this chapter starts off with Gojo versus Sukuna continuing, but we're seeing it from the perspective of all of Jujutsu High and everyone affiliated with them watching it on multiple monitors. This looks like something from like 90s cyberpunk, and they're basically explaining what's going on in case we were confused in the previous chapter, because I know that I was. I definitely missed something crucial, and it's explained at the beginning here, and it's that Sukuna is using domain amplification, where he's essentially like coding himself in simple domain or wicker basket, something like that. And they explain it as where it neutralizes by using a domain that doesn't grant a curse technique in order to pour an opponent's curse technique into the empty space. So yeah, that's very gege of an explanation there, but essentially just means that they're coding themselves in a simple domain more or less so that they can bypass someone's curse technique. And this is super useful against Gojo because, as we know, he is using Limitless, where he just manipulates space and you can't hit him or land any punches, and he also can like use telekinesis somehow with it, where I guess he just manipulates the other space around you or just anything. So that's how Sukuna was actually breaking through Limitless in the previous chapter, and that's what I was talking about. I didn't really catch on to that, and I should have. Sorry about that, guys, but Gojo didn't deactivate it to grab Sukuna's hand in the previous chapter to like pull him into that building. Sukuna was simply just breaking through it using simple domain and just his immense curse energy. We actually find out how immense Sukuna's cursed energy is in this chapter, and I'll get into that later. But also, domain amplification isn't like an easy thing. Like, only elite people can really use this, because even Kusakabe admits that he can't do it, and the only other beings that we saw use this before were the disaster curses, which were special grade and extremely powerful. However, we see Higuruma here. He's just thinking to himself after that statement's made, and he's like, but I do have a sense of how it works. And this might mean that Higuruma could possibly be using domain amplification later on in the series, or whenever he comes back, or whenever he fights somebody. I mean, he definitely is going to have a big moment because his domain expansion, Deadly Sentencing, is so amazing, and it has so much potential to it that somebody has to be put on trial. Like, one of these 1,000-year-old sorcerers has to go through that, and I'd love to see the end result of it. But also, Higuruma is like a genius. He figured out jujitsu in like, I don't know, less than a month or something. He also had his brain transfigured by Kenjaku to have that curse technique, so there is some kind of significance to him for sure. But then Angel also explains that the drawback to domain amplification is that you can't use your innate domain. Now, it says innate domain in the viz, but she's just mainly talking about like your curse technique. Like, you can't just use your curse technique while using domain amplification, which is like, you know, the drawback to it. But for Sukuna, that doesn't really matter because his cursed energy is so immense that he could just beat you down physically while using domain amplification. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Guys, the old ways of working, well, they aren't working anymore. We've been hustling and overworking and tilting our work/life balance to favor work. And where has that really gotten us? We don't buy into the idea that work is everything or one size fits all. We can subscribe to a new vision of work, to something better. And we can subscribe to Skillshare to show us how. Now, as a content creator and someone who's been editing videos for the last 4 years, I recently joined Halise Narvaez's advanced video editing, essential graphics, and more in Adobe Premiere Pro. I can't believe how much her classes opened my eyes in this program. I've pretty much been self-taught for these last 4 years, and just in 10 lessons, I feel like I've leapt 1 year in knowledge. Like, I didn't even know J and L cuts were things before this. Skillshare also has hundreds of career-focused classes too. And as a content creator, I also want to explore other career options as well. So for me personally, I'd like to diversify my income and earn more passive income as well, and mainly just have more control over my financial future. So I also joined Tracy Wallace's e-commerce essentials and how to start a successful online business course. And once again, Skillshare blows my mind because over 9 lessons in Tracy's course has opened my mind unlike it has been before, and by the time I was done with it, I had a renewed sense of confidence on my financial future. So guys, if you're looking to feel the same way, join Skillshare today by clicking the link in my description, because the first 1,000 people to use that link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thanks, guys. As they say, you know, like, supposing there's a way for Sukuna to defeat the Limitless Curse technique aside from amplification, Gojo will lose. So yeah, he essentially does need a technique, but he can also get the job done without it by, just brute force beating him down. But we might not get to that point. But then going further, they go on to talk about domains overlapping each other and what a battle between domains of Sukuna and Gojo would be like. And we got some kind of like unreliable narrators going on here, because it does happen at the end of the chapter, as we all know, and we're going to be talking about that. But it also goes into what happens with the guaranteed hits, and Yuji says, can a domain's guaranteed hit even pierce Gojo's curse technique? He hinted it would that time a cursed spirit's domain swallowed us. So he's talking about way back in the first season, like one of the first episodes when Gojo's fighting Jogo. And Gojo did say that, like when he deflects one of Jogo's guaranteed hits within like, I don't know, it was like a fiery meteor thing, he just deflects it with like his hand using cursed energy. Like he wasn't using limitless or anything. So that's just how powerful Gojo is. He could just exist in a special grades domain and just swat away the guaranteed hit with just his cursed energy. So then going further into the domains clashing discussion here, Choso says that perhaps there won't be a domain battle because Sukuna was the first person who showed us that you can open a domain expansion without closing it, like in the sphere that we typically see. But the way that everybody reacts to it, it's like this is almost impossible. Actually, Hikari himself says that it's basically impossible. Even Kashimo, who is older than everyone here, aside from Angel, agrees with that sentiment. But no, it's not impossible. It's kind of just like Heian era stuff, because we've seen it come from Heian era people such as Sukuna, and the only other person to open up a domain without closing it was Kenjaku. So this is like old world stuff, super elite, top of the food chain stuff that no one else can really do current day, I suppose, aside from like Megumi, but he has no choice but to do it. But he also needs to have like an area to fill it with, as we saw with him going against the finger bearer and him going against Reggie. Like he filled up that gymnasium as a means to hold his domain, aside from, just not closing it, which he obviously doesn't have the ability to do. But it's explained here by throwing water at someone without a water bottle, because the water bottle would represent the domain closing, as we see with Gojo. Like he's using a water bottle more or less to contain his water, as to where Sukuna doesn't need that at all. He could just throw the water at you. And then we also get the painting on air without a canvas analogy, which we also got back before when Sukuna used it in Shibuya against Jogo. So it's not, a perfect way to explain it, since it is a little, I don't know, ambiguous and difficult to fully comprehend something like that. But I guess the painting on air makes more sense, even though you can't do it. But even going further into that, Maki, it's like running software without hardware. So yeah, think about running iOS without an iPhone. Like, you can't. So then going further, they start talking about the curse energy consumption that this battle would take. And that, throwing up domains and using them is extremely taxing on a sorcerer for sure. And as we know before, if you use a domain, then using your curse technique right after is extremely difficult because of, how much cursed energy you had to use. And I don't know if I could say this on YouTube, but it's kind of like a refractory period. And this kind of even applies to Gojo, because Inumaki says that Gojo would never run out of cursed energy, and that's not necessarily the case, because he's just really good at efficiently using his cursed energy, where it said that like he controls consumption through a constant self-preservation. So he's using just enough, but then he's instantly replenishing it. So that's the way that he essentially has infinite cursed energy, but he's just so efficient with it. By the time that he uses some, it will already be replenished. However, if he were to just do a domain expansion and then do a domain expansion again, then that's way outside of the range of what his typical efficiency would be. Like he'd be using way too much. Then his cursed energy wouldn't have been replenished in enough time. So yeah, Gojo can't just spam domains over and over again like the way that you would think. I mean, I don't know how many he can use, but I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, but then he's probably done after that. Like he's completely drained. And then just expanding upon that, they start talking about Sukuna, where Kashimo's like, he's like a god. He activates curse technique and switches between amplification and innate technique quickly. If Gojo didn't have 6 eyes, Sukuna would even best him in cursed energy efficiency. And then Akotsu says he also has more overall cursed energy than I do. His hunch is twice or more. So it's not like they wouldn't open their domains due to a lack of cursed energy, and that's insane. So like I said in the beginning, that's kind of letting us know how much cursed energy energy Sukuna has, which we didn't really know before. I mean, we knew that he had a lot, but it was more so hyped up that like Okotsu had the most besides Gojo. And then, I don't know, Sukuna's amount was ambiguous, but now Okotsu hard scaling Sukuna to at least twice as much as Okotsu, who was, you know, the big cursed energy powerhouse before this point. So I also think it's interesting that he's saying twice or more. This could be giving us more insight into like Sukuna being comprised of two people or something like that. Two just geniuses like Okotsu, but he like absorbed his brother or absorbed another person or something like that. And that's why he has 4 arms and 2 faces. But yeah, Sukuna pretty much unrivaled in curse energy. And Gojo is only able to do what he's doing because of the 6 eyes, which Sukuna doesn't have. He's kind of just like an evil MC. I guess that's kind of what Sukuna more or less is, at least in my opinion. Like, we see the big 3 in typical series, but I think with Sukuna, Kenjaku, and Ararame, they're kind of like the anti-big 3, Sukuna being like the main character or the anti-main character. But then we come into the final sequence of this chapter, and it goes back to the unreliable narration where they actually are clashing their domains. They're not even thinking about all the variables and everything that everyone's talking about in this chapter. You know, similar to Hunter x Hunter dialogue, but Gege does it right. They straight up go in both into their domain expansions. And, you know, as we know, Sukuna's doesn't close and make the spherical thing the way that Gojo's does. So Gojo's is just surrounding the malevolent shrine itself. That's why we see it all warped the way that it is. Because yes, both of their domains are overlapping, but Sukuna's only at the core of it. His radius is like 140 kilometers or close to 200 kilometers, depending on what the translation you read is, but his radius is going way outside of what Gojo's is. And also we're seeing Malevolent Shrine again, and we're seeing like the 3 mouths on the side of it. I also think this is giving us more insight into what Sukuna's innate ability is. Yorozu said that it is called Shrine, although Viz called it Malevolent Shrine, but I'm pretty sure that's just what the domain expansion is. Shrine is like his innate ability, or I think that's what most of the hardcore community has agreed on. But now that their domains have overlapped, it's saying that their can't miss attacks are just canceling each other out because they're more or less even matched at this point. So it's just basically both of them inside of their domains just standing there, and I guess they could fight, but no can't miss attacks or instant hits are going to happen until one of them like go down, because it says, you know, they fought with both their domains open. If one takes heavy damage or one of their domains collapses, the other's guaranteed hit will immediately strike. And yeah, we see that happen because Sukuna's barrier has a radius of 140 kilometers or close to 200, so it is surrounding Gojo's barrier at all times. So think of Gojo's domain expansion as like a black sphere sitting on a 2D flat, even bigger sphere. So its radius will always be around it, therefore it is vulnerable to being attacked by Sukuna's domain. And as we saw before, the outside of barriers are very vulnerable to attacks. We saw that Toji was able to break into Dagon's domain expansion, and most recently we actually saw that when Okotsu was fighting against Takako and Ryu, all 3 of their domains overlapped, and then the cockroach curse spirit Kurorushi came in from the outside and easily broke it. So Sukuna is managing to do this just with his open domain attacks, like his slashing attacks, cleave and dismantle. So him using cleave and dismantle, or whatever the slashing abilities that he decides to use within Malevolent Shrine, are cracking the outside of Sukuna's domain expansion and breaking it. So then, as the narration also said, you know, once the domains are no longer overlapping, or, you know, somebody takes damage or whatever, the domain that is still standing, their instant attack will instantly activate, and that's what happened. And it looks like he's straight up decapitating Gojo. Like, when I first saw these panels, it looked like maybe he was just slicing his neck or something, but no, it is straight up going through it. Like, we see blood coming out of it on both sides. So Gojo is technically getting decapitated here, and this is like way more efficient than what Toji was doing, because Toji kind of stabbed him in the neck, then also stabbed him in the head with like a little butter knife. But no, Sukuna just instantly cutting his head off, and it's like, is this the death of Gojo? Is he dead after just, I don't know, 2.5 chapters of fighting? And I don't think so. I mean, come on. It would be so anticlimactic if Gege decides to end the fight here with just Sukuna instantly cutting off his head after outsmarting him with the whole domain thing. And part of me thinks that Gojo probably knows what's going on here with Sukuna's flat domain because his brain works much faster, you know, of course with the 6 eyes and everything, but also just his experience. So I'm thinking that this isn't the end for Gojo, and he is just going to instantly reverse curse technique back from this. Well, at least hopefully. Like I said, it kind of would be anticlimactic, right, if he would just die here. So maybe this could also go back to what he was talking about 2 chapters ago, about how he underwent some special training so he didn't have to hold back against Megumi. I really do think that means that he can apply reverse curse technique to others, the way that we saw Kotsu and Shoko doing it, so he'd be able to heal Megumi after killing him and getting Sukuna exercise from him or whatever. But I also think that means that overall his reverse curse technique has been amplified, so he can just instantly heal himself and, you know, come back from having his head severed. And the fight will continue, because also Sukuna hasn't even begun to use the 10 shadows yet. And that also goes back to what we've talked about many times on the channel, and it's that Gojo told Megumi that, you know, 400 years ago, the leaders of the Gojo clan and the Zenin clan fought in front of the hierarchy, and the leader of the Gojo clan had Limitless and the 6 eyes, and the, you know, the Zenin guy had the 10 shadows technique, and they both wound up killing each other. So that kind of has to come to fruition. Like, we have to see Sukuna use the full potential of the 10 shadows against Gojo. So yeah, I do think this is going to continue for at least another couple chapters. But let me know what you think about this one in the comments, guys, and if you liked it, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.